Protecting customers from fraud is a delicate balance. Banks must try their best to prevent flagging genuine customers as fraud, because that creates friction. However, they also want to make sure they're stopping as much of the fraud as possible. This is hard because these fraud systems generate a lot of alerts, and the fraud case managers have to review these and combine the alerts with their domain expertise and other data points to determine if fraud is actually occurring. With fraud and scam on the rise, unfortunately, it's just simply not possible for these case managers to get to every alert. Using the Azure OpenAI Service and these new O1 series of models, it's possible to now combine this structured data with unstructured data and its general domain knowledge. So things like call transcripts and purchase histories, for the model to then make a determination of, is it likely that fraud's occurring, and prioritize which cases the fraud manager looks at. Let's take a look at how this works. In this scenario, we're given 30 cases that were alerted on by the fraud system, and we want the models to correctly predict the top 5 that should be reviewed by the fraud case manager. We also want the models to have a go at predicting which of those is most likely to be fraud. So if we look at the results, GPT-4o does a pretty good job. The top 5 it identifies are the correct top 5 that should be prioritized for review. In the output, Tierney is actually a fraudulent case. However, Matt and Julia are flagged and they're not actually fraud cases, but Michael was and was missed. And we also see if you run it multiple times, GPT-4o sometimes gives different results each time, even with the temperature set to 0. In contrast, with the O1 series of models, if we run this analysis, we can see that it identified the correct top 5 for review, which is great, but it also correctly identified customer 2, Tierney, and customer 23, Michael, as the most likely fraud cases. If we dig into the data a little bit more, we can see for customer 2, Tierney, it has all the usual structured data, that was why the fraud system alerted on this customer, but we can also see other clues. For example, buying multiple different SIM cards or buying an old phone. These types of activities are typically correlated with fraud or scam, so this is really good. Now, if we look at a case of a false positive, let's look at Matt. Matt was flagged because his app was registered on 2 new devices in the last 24 hours. But when we look at some of the other purchase data, we can see that he bought a flagship phone and tablet in the last couple of days. And he actually called about enrolling the app on other devices. So this is very clearly a case of a false positive, and the model identifies it as such. Similarly for customer 15, Julia, her account was pinging in multiple cities in unusual locations, but we can see that she recently applied for a travel credit card and bought some different apparel to do with travel. So again, the model says, while we still should review it, again, this is likely a case of a false positive. So you can see that this model, by combining these different clues together with structured data, can provide much better recommendations. With O1, banks can prioritize where their case managers spend their time, empowering them to better protect customers from fraud. We're super excited to see what you create using the Azure OpenAI Service and the new O1 series of models. Head on over to our homepage to get started today.